Okay, so I just thought I'd make a quick video while on holiday with the family in a beautiful forest here in England, because something is really coming to light in Trump's behavior right now. Now, you see, a self-fulfilling prophecy is something that's well known and described in psychology. It effectively involves a series of events that you're really afraid of coming to pass. Something that becomes a preoccupation, that becomes a real worry, that is in your mind, playing through again and again, and that is the way that you see the world and things that you fear that might come to pass about it. But it leads you to behave in such a way that while it might not have been true originally, you eventually make it true and you make it come to pass when previously it didn't. Now, this is exactly what we're seeing with Trump in relation to his understanding of the world and economic policies with the rest of the world. So Trump had this belief that America was being ripped off. He had this constant grievance about other countries taking advantage of America. He had this idea that America was constantly being taken advantage of and that the country was always at the behest of other countries' whims and desires, constantly and perpetually disadvantaging the US. That was his essential mindset. That was how he saw the world. And of course that wasn't the case, but we know that's how he saw the world because when he put up that big cardboard cutout in the Rose Garden, what he said was exactly that. He listed a series of tariffs that he believed other countries were imposing against the US. None of them were actually true. There weren't any tariffs or any obstacles that other countries were putting to the US in terms of their trade. But nevertheless, that's the reality that he saw. So he then imposed a series of tariffs that he said were retaliatory tariffs, retaliating against those notions in his head. And now what's happened is that those tariffs are coming into fruition. Other countries are now imposing tariffs on the US in ways that wasn't the case before, but is now. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. His idea that the US is being taken advantage of, that the US is being ill-treated by its neighbours and trading partners, that the US is being disadvantaged by countries all around the world, is actually now coming to pass because not only are they imposing tariffs on the US where they previously didn't, on top of that, they're actually in discussions right now about excluding the US from various trade organizations and deals. I've heard it reliably reported that there are, in capitals around the world, Paris, London, Berlin, and also the capitals in India and Canada and all around the world, they're actively now working on forming a trading bloc that excludes the US, that allows frictionless trade without tariffs between them and opens up markets between them, but excludes the US, unless the US, of course, drops all its tariffs and decides to join a frictionless trading bloc itself. But they're going to form a bloc and exclude the US. So all these ideas about the world excluding America, about the world not taking America seriously, are actually coming to pass. They didn't exist at all just a couple of months ago. They existed only in Trump's world. That world only existed in Trump's mind. But now it's coming to pass in reality. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And this series of grievances and paranoias that then become a reality in a self-fulfilling prophecy is actually a very consistent characteristic of autocrats around the world and throughout history. Just look at Vladimir Putin, for example. In the early 2000s, after he was a few years into power, Russia had been given every respect. Russia had been invited to every table. Russia had been made a member of every club. Partnerships were extended to Russia from around the world. But Putin only saw an increasing list of enemies. And he gave a speech in Berlin in which he said, we are being taken advantage of, we are being looked down on, people aren't taking us seriously, the world is being led by hegemony in the US and its allies, and we are not part of it. When of course nothing could be further from the truth. But he eventually made that true. Because at the time he made that speech, Russia had even been invited to a new beefed up G7, they called it the G8, in order to include Russia. But of course Russia had no place in the G8. Russia wasn't the 8th biggest economy in the world that they could just add on to the 7th biggest economies in the world and make a G8. It was way down the league. It was just about big enough to be included in the G20. Russia's economy is about the same size as Italy's. So it had no business being in a G8, but such was the desire of Western allies to form alliances with Russia that that club was open up to it. That friendship was extended. And yet it wasn't true in his mind, and because of that, he ended up pushing against it. And then he started to assert himself, saying that we need to be taken seriously and we're going to gain the respect of others. So he invaded Georgia. And then he invaded Ukraine and annexed Crimea. And then he invaded more of Ukraine. And slowly over time, those paranoias that existed in his head about Russia being excluded, Russia being a pariah, became true. And Russia now is a pariah, a disgraced state, and very soon a failed state too. And all because of his grievances, his fears and his paranoias that he made true through his behaviors. Another example alive in the world today is Bashar Assad, the dictator of Syria. When the Arab Spring came about, it started in Tunisia, where a young man, a market stall holder, set himself on fire in protest at the draconian and violent policies of his government, and other people rose up alongside him and toppled the regime, and regime after regime was fighting uprisings and sometimes being toppled across the Middle East. But none of that actually happened in Syria. It didn't get to Syria. And there was one local province in which some really corrupt and oppressive actions took place. And so there was a local protest against those actions. And Assad at the time was advised by some of his advisors, why don't we get on board with the protesters? Why don't we say, we hear you, we agree with you, we support you, we want to root out corruption, we want to bring about a more humane society. Let's do it together. But instead of doing that, he had the fears in his mind. He was always afraid, as all autocrats always are, that he is going to be deposed and toppled by the people, because deep down inside, they live on fear and paranoia. And so instead of teaming up and partnering with those people, those young people who started to protest, he reacted to them violently, and he brought about mass bloodshed. And so more people protested, and so the bloodshed escalated, and eventually it became an all-out civil war. A civil war that he would have actually lost very quickly if it wasn't for support from his friend Vladimir Putin, who kept him in power another couple of years, but eventually even that was overwhelmed too. And now Assad is alone somewhere in a flat in Moscow, not even able to enter his country. And so this mindset dancing with paranoia is the exact blueprint of the authoritarian mindset. And what they then do is turn those fears into a genuine reality in the outside world. And that's exactly what Trump has done. His fears about the world community and the way the world economy works and the way the US is taken advantage of and excluded is actually coming to pass. And that's exactly how he's going to deal with his domestic audience too. Protests are now erupting across the country, and his paranoia and fear of them will lead him to label them as traitors, as the enemy within, and he will overreact to them based on his fears and grievances rather than the reality of what's going on. Entirely peaceful protests in a democratic country that should be allowed, indeed celebrated. So those overreactions that are inevitable from Trump will themselves then lead to further protests, the rightful demonstration, peaceful demonstrations from people, which Trump will then overreact to further, and so the cycle will continue until his darkest fears become a reality. Again and again, this is the cycle the autocrats circle down. Just as surely as dirty waters cycles down a drain, so the mind of the autocrat will cycle into ever-growing grievances, fears and paranoias, and make those mindsets into the reality around them. Whether it's Muammar Gaddafi of Libya, whether it's Saddam Hussein of Iraq, there's so many throughout history. This is exactly how they react and what they create around them. And because Trump is the most powerful man in the world, we are now increasingly living in the dystopia of his mind, as his greatest and most irrational grievances and fears become realities in the world around us. Realities that we are all being forced now to live. Thank you for watching my video. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm also interested in philosophy and public policy and politics. I aim to make a number of videos about these subjects, and particularly the intersection between them. If you're able to like and subscribe to this channel, then it'll really help, and also put in some comments whenever you can. That'll really help the algorithm. It'll really help promote this channel to other people. Now, beyond that, we are all, unfortunately, at the behest of a very small number of people who seem to run everything these days. And we are all at the whim of a tech oligarch who could decide tomorrow to end a channel like this because it's not in their favor. And because of that, I've set up a kind of email newsletter, which you can subscribe to. At the top of the channel, you'll see a web address. Please go there and subscribe to my newsletter. That way you can stay in touch with the videos I'm making. At least we can keep the content flowing. So I hope you can do that. And I hope we can keep talking and also gain clarity, not just about what's happening right now, but how we can get through this, how we can improve things to make a better tomorrow together. Thank you.